5:31.
Great. Roll call is next. Commissioner Casiari,
Here.
Commissioner Parker,
Here.
Commissioner Young,
Here.
Commissioner Wolf,
Here.
and Commissioner Nemeth is not here, at least yet.
First up, we will approve the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And now we will approve the minutes from the October, I'm sorry. First public commentary. Please limit your comments to agenda items only.
Hi. My name is Debbie Marks. I've been a vendor at the Farmers Market for 27 years. And I kind of keep saying the same thing, but I'm going to keep saying it until this happens. We're hoping for improvements for the market, and it looks like we're going that way. I'm glad we're revisiting the needs of the market. And again, just a limited heat supply source, some clear, lightweight, but sturdy sides that can break the wind would go far. It would make the customers more comfortable year-round and the vendors. A building is too limiting, and the space is, we've already outgrown it. The winter market takes up, on any good day, can take up most of the main aisle, which is, the building would only be half that space. So we would have already outgrown the building before we even put a dollar into it. So we're glad that we're revisiting the needs of the market, and hopefully we can improve our beautiful open air market. The market is so popular, and I think one of the reasons is because in such a crowded little town, it is an open air market. And it would be nice to have sides that can be open to the air in the nicer months that we have. Also reminding people that the Sandlot is only used about 1/3 of the year for vendors. So we don't always fill our market. So maybe we should focus on what we do have, take better care of. It needs repair, and it could use updating. And also I would like to touch on the segregated seniority list for artists and producers. Artists are producers. I think it's too bad that there is a segregated list. I do feel like it is discrimination. I feel like these 20-year veteran artists, vendors that have been here are cornerstones of the market and should be rewarded with a stall. It's just fair, and to not do so is definitely discrimination. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? Now we'll approve the minutes from the October meeting.
I motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any presentations this evening?
No presentation.
Okay. No presentations. We'll move on to agenda items, the winterization improvements.
Okay, so I think that the first thing I wanted to share with this was in your packet, if you go, the next item is a letter from Tetra Tech. This is a study that was done in 2016 that we had in order to assess the possibility of doing the roll-up sides and or some kind of doors on the sides of the market. And we knew the study had been done, but this was kind of to clarify, you know, what had been looked at specifically. So I won't read the whole thing, but I think that the things that stick out really are they looked at a couple different options, vinyl roll-up doors, metal coiling doors, but something that was lightweight and has a clear window in it, sections. They were also looking at this, they did the assessment only along those stalls along Detroit Street. I'm sorry, I don't have a map of the market, but if all of you can picture it, that's on the main aisle along Detroit Street. And in the winter, that is where most of the vendors cluster. And so I think the thought was in the winter time, it makes sense to kind of focus on maybe a section of the market because it's less costly as opposed to the whole entire structure. They also point out, the main things to consider are the wind load. So that's a big factor because that puts a lot of stress on it, and also the dead load. So, the new materials themselves weigh. And also to remember that we may lose some space in the stalls if we do add these doors, and that was an important point, I think, that they made. So the final thing that wasn't sure with the study was, can our foundation support it? And they suggested having an assessment done to see whether or not it could. And then I don't think that assessment ever got done, but that was the suggestion, and I think might be one of the next steps in moving forward with something like this, to know whether or not we would have to fix the foundation first to be able to support this. So that's some information we don't have. There were some cost estimates for this. I think that, a couple years ago, they probably would not be the same today. But yeah, they did provide a range in the study. So that kind of summarizes it. I guess I would love to hear thoughts on that.
I guess just a little bit of background with it too, that this is something that came out quite a while ago, when this was originally when we were first trying to figure out this route. And this is, I think, what got down the path of building the building versus the enclosure. But the challenge is that we never actually saw the report. And so this is the effort to actually reveal the report and see what it said. It was just kind of, this is what quickly decided that path. And I wanted to see it because I also wanted to see really what they said and why. And they bring up some good points. And it is challenging, but I think you can't work in a vacuum. You need to actually have some light on it. And so trying to get this out. So noticing too that this is an older report from this. And so, the whole program has gone down a different path for a while, but I think it's worth revisiting it and making it a little clearer.
So the one thing I saw that was missing was just, how do you do the assessment of the foundation?
Oh, I think they had an explanation in here that they would excavate alongside the stall, and then, they determine, I guess, what the foundation actually looks like.
So I'm assuming it's the major posts that hold up the roof, probably
I think so.
Yeah,
the
I think so.
issue.
Yeah.
I think the soil under it, how strong that soil is to hold it up.
Well, and how deep the posts are in and things like that.
Yeah.
So it would mean a little construction.
Mhm.
Was any of that exposed in the current construction?
No.
That's a shame.
They didn't get close enough. Okay.
I thought it was interesting too that they made the good point that enclosing the main aisle is more feasible, at least to start, because there are no step downs in the stalls. So it's the only part of the market where the stalls are contiguous without, because I think that would add a lot more work and materials and customization. So, but I'm also slightly alarmed at the cost estimate of it too. So for those who haven't read the report, it's up to $325,000 for enclosure, and then if the foundation needs to be buffered, which I'm willing to wager it's going to need that, another $150,000. So already we're at $475,000 just to enclose it and build up, and that doesn't include any heating systems or doors. It doesn't include the exploration work that needs to be done to determine if the foundation needs to be buffered. And then let's add, a 10 to 20% buffer on that cost for just 2 years have passed and the cost of construction is that much higher. I mean, are we looking at something that's, maybe hedging on $1 million, which was the budget for the building to begin with? So, I think, as we move forward in this, it would be really great to sort of try, as best as we can to get realistic numbers on this project and look at that comparatively, because Parks and Recreation is still going to put the building out for bid in March, right?
Well, I think they're going to possibly put it out to bid in March.
Okay.
I think they want to assess, again, whether or not the climate's good and we're in a good place. And if they think it is, then yes. The earliest they could put it out for bid again is this spring. We don't know yet if that'll happen, but it's
Yeah.
the earliest it could happen.
So I feel like all the more reason to spend these next few months, December through March, to get an actual cost comparison and what does this project really look like? And then we can really compare
Mhm.
apples to apples,
Mhm.
right?
That's great.
That's smart, yeah.
I may be going as far as to get, if they're getting a bid for the construction of the new building, also getting a bid for these enclosures. Because this is still pretty loosey-goosey, and it's not quite to the level of a bid. But if we did converge on a certain, so we could do an apples-to-apples comparison of, you get this as an enclosed space, or you get this as an enclosed space for whatever cost, that's actually a more firm bid. I think that would be a more authentic choice than do or don't.
Yeah.
So the new building has to have a foundation plan in it too, right?
Yes.
So I'm wondering if, as part of that discussion about a potential future new building, if that could wrap into, let's think about the foundation that's already existing there in the market too. If somebody's coming out and doing a site inspection, can they also look at the foundation under the,
Yeah.
You mean for the structural integrity concern
Right,
that
yeah.
they're outlining? Oh,
Yeah.
that's a good idea.
You mean when they come,
if somebody came out to look at the area and think about the foundation for a new building, can they also then assess the foundation of the structure that's already there?
yeah, okay, we can see. I think, yeah, I can definitely ask as I kind of see how the bidding process, if we do it this spring, how that unfolds. I know with the new building, it would be pouring a totally new foundation because it is in the middle of the lot, which has never had, yeah, they need to make it flat, basically, and
But I'm assuming they'll be doing some assessment of the geology underneath and how thick a foundation pour you need for the structure. It's a much more substantial structure, but it still might give some estimates.
okay.
Yeah, I really like the idea of having both of these as more fleshed out options that we can kind of compare, both from a cost perspective and a sort of impact perspective.
Also, something that this,
Oh, Stephanie, can you speak up?
oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? Is this better? Is this better? A little? I don't know.
Can you turn it up?
Is your on?
Is it on?
It is on.
It
It's
is on?
on, yes.
Okay, I'll just have to talk more into it.
Thank you.
So, something that this didn't address as much that we're looking at as well as the radiant heating. And I think a question, or, my thought is like, is this something I think this is something we should look into as well. It's another option we as a committee have talked about. And it could be done, I guess one of the questions was, should it be done only kind of at the same time as sides to a market? Or is this something that we might even ask to be done independently of sides? Can it be its own separate project, or does it make sense to do, ideally, of course, they both get done. So I guess I'd like to hear thoughts on that too.
I don't know anything about
Okay.
radiant
No.
heat.
Yeah.
and exactly how it
Not
works.
know much, okay.
I don't know how I feel about heat without sides.
Yeah.
I don't know, it doesn't sit well with me, it just seems inefficient. Maybe I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But, and I know there are fantastic heaters out there, but to me, the sides go in first.
Okay.
If it has to be staged, sides and then heating and not the other way around.
Okay, I think that makes sense. I think, though, you're right, we need to find out more about what radiant heat looks like and kind of how it works. I wish Jeff was here. He has he knows some companies that install radiant heating, and just from what the little I understand is it heats the cement and the ground more than the air around it. So it seems like that might be a little more, better if we didn't have sides and we did have heat, that you know, if it's like the walkway you're walking on is what's heated, then that would be nice. But I think what my next step with that is, because we do know a few companies that do that, we can have them actually just come out, take a look at our space, and tell us a little bit more about how does radiant heating actually work in this type of a space. That could inform our committee more. And that's like not necessarily a bid, but more of like a project outline, I think. Yeah, and that's something that I can move forward with probably this month.
I think having that information would be useful just
Okay.
to get a full picture. But I also do think that you just maybe purely from an environmental perspective, it seems like dumping a bunch of energy into the solution versus trying to at least reduce your leaks. It seems like reducing your leaks makes a lot more sense in that sense. And also that they do seem a little bit like they could operate fairly independently in terms of if you have one or the other, that they don't necessarily, one's not contingent upon the other so much. So that if you did, our choice of how we enclosed would not necessarily influence our choice of how we heated as much. Maybe it would, but I don't know. They seem fairly independent in my mind.
Okay. I think they could be independent. I think we need to know more about how radiant heating works, but I think we can keep an open mind as that's possible. Okay.
I wonder if the companies might have some idea about enclosing to the radiant heat companies.
They might.
Yeah,
That's
we
true.
can ask them.
To deal with the leaks issue, yeah.
So also to add to this conversation, Peter had some things that he sent, and I was not able to get it online in the agenda packet. So I included it in your packets here. And for those watching the video, or if you're looking back online and watching the meeting, I have pulled it up on the screen. So is there anything maybe that we haven't touched on that was in your brainstorm, your document?
Yeah, what I was trying to do here is just capture, there have been a lot of ideas that have come through, and one challenge we've had long-term is that those ideas get lost. And also they don't really get data to put them side by side. And so trying to assess all these things together in a way that makes sense, where we can actually show what the effects of these things are. Do you want me to, should I scroll through up there? Or is that,
Yeah,
Yeah, why don't we do that?
that makes more sense. Let's do that.
Okay, so what I first was trying to figure out was just a sense of perspective as to where we are with these, how we could put an enclosure on this structure. And I think I had a lot of misnomers about how the structure was actually put together, so I drew it out to scale and to get a sense of where these things are. And essentially, here's where the vendors are, here's where this walkway where people are, and here's a person, and here's a car, and this is a big car actually, but let's say an SUV. But there are really two places you could put a surface, on the very far outside or further in, which is structurally maybe a little bit better, but is really horrible in terms of use. But it would be much more desirable to be on the outside, but is really bad structurally. And so that's the challenge. And I think that's what the structural engineers were saying too, is that they wanted to have a way to make it stable and strong. So just first kind of breaking the space down a little bit with those, and I list out some pros and cons with each of those. I'm not saying which way it should be. But also then working through what some various enclosure methods that we've talked about and some that we haven't, and also trying to get some costs associated with these. And that's been one thing we haven't had so much of. And actually dealing with a real link as to what these things are. So vinyl roll down, about $50 a linear foot. I'm talking linear foot in terms of assuming the height of, I think, 12 feet and going along the length of this thing. Versus glass garage doors, which are quite a bit more, $300 per linear foot. There are clear vinyl tarps with either Velcro edges or grommets, which are a lot less expensive. Or there are the white poly tarps with grommets, which is actually, if you look at the market now, there are a bunch of farmers using these, and that's how they do it. And they will often kind of lash them up to this bottom beam here, which I don't know how that deals with the structure, but as long as it's infrequent enough, it's fine. When you get, if we got a lot of those, I don't know what would happen. That I would be really, the worst case would be if we had something where the market, part of the market collapsed. And that could happen, and so that's a realistic fear, that we put a big sail on it and a big gust of wind comes and people are trapped under a fallen market. That's bad, we don't want that to happen. But so just in terms of materials, those are some of the options for these. Also, there are strip curtains, which is, I talked about some homemade ones before. They're actually more official ones, which deal with the wind issue in terms of wind can blow through them, but also wind can blow through them. And it does look like an industrial freezer. And they don't roll up as well and things like that. They're cheap, they're inexpensive. Let's call them inexpensive. But how do you do that and how do you handle that is unclear. Other options too that have come up in discussing with these is that, for example, I think someone mentioned using a hoop house. So there are a lot of cold frames that we, a lot of the farmers deal with all the time for winter stuff. Could you put a hoop house into the sand lot? And for a high tunnel that's 30 feet by 75 feet is about $8K. Quite inexpensive, and materials can be taken up and taken down fairly quickly, and there's the expertise in the market already and a lot of knowledge in there. So that could be a possibility, and would that be enough to hold some of that? I don't know, something to discuss. Another thing that came up was that with the recent passage of the city park, the city center park on the library lot, that one of the discussions we had last week or last time was that could you use that, or are there other spaces in town that could work for a winter enclosure? And since the city park is undefined right now, could that potentially become something like that? And I don't know, maybe. There's an opportunity for collaboration. There's an opportunity for maybe creating something there. I don't know if they would actually deal with that. Or something else in talking to people that a lot of people I've spoken to, if there's other people buyers at the market, shoppers at the market, have suggested to me that we should do a radical redesign of it. Parking is a horrible problem. We should rip up the whole market, put underground parking under it, and then make it into a plaza, and then have something on top of it, which the city does big projects, and is that something to think about? That we're thinking often very small, very micro changes, and there's an advantage to that, but long term, would it be better to do something really big and solve all these problems, but maybe at a tremendous cost? I don't know. But I just want to keep a log going of these ideas and also add to these. So as we come up with more ideas, as you guys come up, if we can keep adding to this and filtering this out so we can get a better set of what it will actually work or what not, then I think this will serve us better. So that's what this is for.
Well, thanks for putting that together.
Yeah.
Very, very informative.
Stephanie, can we get this electronically so we can explore the links?
Yes, so I can make this available to the commission, and also in the public link, if you go to the farmers market website and go to the city documents, I can put that up there as well. Okay.
So I'm curious what you think the next steps are for us.
Okay, so I guess let me say what I'm hearing, and you let me know if this makes sense. It sounds like we really want to know, we want to assess the foundation, so an assessment of that. We would really like, so that comes kind of before, I see that as coming before we look for a bid to get the sides done. Yeah, basically it just has to happen. First, we have to know whether or not we have to do the foundation. And then the other thing I'm kind of hearing is we might want to put some sort of radiant heat in. So a little bit more about radiant heat, what does that mean in that space? How does it work?
What does it cost?
What does it cost? What's it look like for that space? So foundation and radiant heat. And then once we know the foundation, we can move forward with looking at sides. But those two things for now. Okay, that's kind of what I'm hearing. Does that sound good?
Go ahead.
What?
Can't hear your first
For radiant heat.
Oh,
Oh, foundation.
foundation.
Exploring the foundation.
And with the foundation assessment, does it have to be a whole structure assessment? Because if there's weight loading on the part that holds the roof, so.
It seems important.
Yeah,
So,
Yeah,
so maybe it's just a
probably.
structural assessment.
right,
Can anything be done?
right. Yeah, okay.
Stephanie, in terms of next steps, one of the things I'm wondering about is what kind of resources are available for any or all of this. I mean, someone mentioned the comparison to the cost that was originally laid out for the building, and that there weren't sufficient funds
Right.
for that. And so I'm just kind of wondering if we have parameters for even what's available that we could use to undertake some of these, or if that's still to be determined.
That's a really good question. So I think that the funding, when we had talked about the building, the funding was coming from multiple places. And so we have several places funding could come from: developer contributions. We have a savings. The market has a savings. There's millage, and then there's DDA as well, because they've given us grants in the past. And they were willing to give us a grant for the building, and might, we could probably approach them again about something. So I think that, as with the building, when the cost got up to like 1.3, 1.5 million, that seems to be difficult, at least now, to reach. So I'm thinking that we're looking for solutions that are below the $1 million mark. But I think it also has to be considered that if we do spend money on some of these things, yes, it does take from what we had planned to spend on the building. And so I don't know what the turnaround point is where, we can invest in some of these and still build the building versus we have to choose between one or the other. I don't think there's a hard number for that, but I think we should keep that in mind as we're looking at costs.
I think that's helpful. So it doesn't sound like there's necessarily one pot of money that's for the building / improvements. It sounds like for the building, there was like a sort of piecemeal contributions that added up, not entirely, but in part to the building. And so there's maybe some of that, but certainly not all of that that's also available for these other types of improvements.
Yes.
Okay. And do you think that there's a way for us to get like is $1 million like sort of the ballpark, or it just feels like having some kind of ceiling would be helpful? Or
That's something
base and ceiling?
I think I have to go back and talk to Parks and Rec about,
Okay,
but I can do that.
fair enough, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if we could find the number that, because Sarah raised X amount of money,
Yeah.
or she had budgeted it all when she was planning the building, and some of it included the DDA grant as well, which I understand is still available. So if we could have that history, it would be really helpful.
Yeah.
That she raised.
Yeah, I could look at what the breakdown of each, like where was the funding coming from each source. Like the DDA grant, for example, I think was specifically for the building. It would be like another conversation if we wanted to use it differently. But, how much do we have in the market fund, and how much do we have, what was it going to be for the building, and what,
Yeah.
that would be good to know.
Yeah,
Yes,
I think the commitments that were made and to do what? I mean, what were the priorities of those particular commitments? So we know if we're likely to move away from something that would be within the realm of their funding priority or not.
Okay, yeah, I can get that
Thank you.
information. Yeah. Okay. I might have mentioned this earlier, but for sharing documents, again, if you come across a study or, something that you want to use in this discussion, we email it to me and I will include it in the agenda packet and make it public for the next meeting. And as long as we have shared and made documents public, then those are something we can add to like a shared drive that we can all look at. Yeah, but first you should just email it to me so I can submit it for the next meeting.
I really like the sort of compendium of ideas and options. I think that's great. I do have to say, I think that this radical redesign of the market is a compelling, interesting idea, and I have to imagine that the vendors have sort of had their fill of radical redesign and construction, which, it is, I think, an important consideration, among others. And so, I'm not quite sure what the process would be for sort of assessing all of the options and ideas, but I just want to appreciate that you're thinking creatively and also sort of collecting them all in one place.
Happy to.
Thanks. Good.
Move on.
Yeah, I think so.
Now we will have the market manager report.
All right, so that is, I think, the last page in this packet. All right, so we have hung the holiday lights in the market, so it's pretty and ready for Christmas. Wreaths will be donated by Gates, Gracia's Greenhouse, and Tadachek Greenhouses to hang at the entrances. We are also conducting customer and vendor surveys this month, which I'll share the results in December. So we did these last year with the input from PMAC and what the question should be. I did pare them down a little. They were long, just because they were the first surveys we'd really done. We wanted to go really in depth. So, I kind of chose, I think, what we had identified as some of the most important questions, and also matched them to MIFMA conducts. MIFMA works with farmers markets across the state to try to gather the same data so that we can have apple-to-apple comparisons between markets and know sort of the impact farmers markets have in the state of Michigan. And so I also chose questions that matched what MIFMA is doing with other markets. So we will be able to compare that data to other Washtenaw County markets and across the board.
Does everyone know what MIFMA is?
Oh, sorry. Yes, the Michigan Farmers Market Association. So I will share that as well. Yeah, so I'll share that next month.
And that was the survey boards that were up with the dots on it
Yeah.
last week.
Yes.
in the market.
Survey board, dot surveys. So this winter, last Wednesday market of the year is December 19th, just before Christmas. The last Saturday market is December 29th until we move to the new hours. So in January, we start an hour later. And we also don't have Wednesdays. We are currently accepting bids for gutter replacement. It's really my goal to have those replaced by this spring. So we've gotten in, a few bids, and this was identified in last year's vendor survey as one of the top priorities for our facility. They're just dented beyond repair, some of them, and we have quick fixes often, but people get rained on a lot. So the plan is these will be easier to fix because it's quicker to be able to produce a new gutter, basically, with this method, with a company that whichever one we go with, and also we will be charging if a vendor hits it for replacement. Oh, the Market to Chef program, we ran June through November. We're going to try and do it again next spring. I was pretty excited about this program. It's really trying to consolidate lists of what farmers have and get these to the chefs, and then chefs can order online wholesale and come to the market, so farmers have sales ahead of time. This happens individually with farmers and has been going on for a long time, but really trying to get it all together in one place. So we have some students assessing and doing interviews this winter to analyze what went wrong, what went right, how can we improve it. We did 5,669 total sales through the program this summer. Yeah, so just trying to make it better.
So do you have to manage that list of what people are bringing in?
I manage it along with Jay Gerhart, who is with U of M Extension. So there is some staff time.
Great.
Yeah.
And which U of M group is helping you, do you know?
This is a class that does, it's like a data, they look at systems development
Great.
and data,
Great.
basically. Can't remember the exact name of the
That's
class.
okay. Good.
And then finally, I kind of just listed some of our priorities for this winter that we'll be working on. And if you also, as a committee, have suggestions for things we can be looking into as we do our planning, this is our planning time of year. We're going to be, doing this research that we just talked about. Focus on farm to school programming, and then, planning our regular activities. So the CSA fair, monthly cooking demonstrations with chefs. The market's 100th birthday is coming up. Flower Day and the Halloween Bash were our big ones.
Do we have a day that's the birthday, or is it?
We usually do it in August.
Okay.
We don't have a date set though.
We should choose that, yeah.
Yeah.
The date of birth.
The date, yeah, we
The
have to
date
define,
that
it's gotta be a
One
day. A birthday
Saturday.
can't be a day without a
Yeah.
day. Birthday month, it will be.
Birthday month. Yeah.
And if you need help with any of that too, I love to look at history stuff.
Oh yeah,
So-
That'd be
that
cool.
would be wonderful. I'd love to put together some history of the market and photos for our birthday. That would be a very cool thing to have. Hmm.
Okay, I've just spent time at the Bentley Library, and I think there's a file there, so.
That would be
I'll
so
start
great. Thank
looking
you.
at that.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, that's
Okay.
all I have.
All right. Now we will open up for our second public comment period.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Debbie Marks still. I do have a concern about the music at the market. I've been playing the music at the market for 25 years with my CD players, and it's so old-fashioned, it's ridiculous. There was a sound system installed in the market years ago. Jessica had it put in for weddings. It has never worked right. For one thing, the speakers are so ancient, they're like this big. And I'm sure speakers this big would do the trick nowadays. Also, when you run the sound system, it's really loud by the office in that first intersection. And then as you go through the market, you can't hear it at all. So that really needs to be updated. Music in a retail venue like that is very important for mood and ambiance. They have it everywhere. Meijer, gas stations, all markets. It's really important to have a nice atmosphere-setting music. They have it in Carytown as well. I would like to see that be one of the priorities. And of course, with the holiday coming up, we've had gloomy weather, horrible weather this last 6 weeks down there. Live music, multiple people, like at this end and at this end. There's like 3 areas where we could have live music and keep them coming. These guys are here for a couple hours and then these people move in. And then in between, it would be nice to have the music piped in through the market. It would be nice to have it as an emergency system as well and have that working proper. So thank you very much. Thank you so much for caring about our market. It is exciting that it's going to be 100 years old this next year, and I hope we can keep that rich outdoor tradition. Thank you. See you at the farmer's market.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then finally, this person was not able to make it in person to the meeting, but she asked that I share her comment. So I've included it in the packet, and I'm just going to read the letter. So this is from Christine Choupre, who is did I say that right? Choupre? Christine Choupre, who is a vendor, an artisan vendor at the market. Good afternoon, Market Master and Market Commissioners. I'm an artisan vendor that has attended the Ann Arbor Public Market on Saturdays and Wednesdays for the past 23 years. I would like to readdress an issue that I brought before your commission in late summer that is one of honoring the seniority of longtime artisan vendors. When it comes to being assigned a permanent booth at the market, we are excluded. Instead, growers who have started attending years and in some cases decades after us are allowed to leapfrog over us and attain a permanent booth. With the current market bylaws, we will continue to sit in limbo and drop further down the list until we are virtually displaced from the market altogether, unless an artisan vendor gives up their booth or passes away. I'm not asking this commission to expand the number of artisan vendors. There is already a moratorium on the number of artisans allowed, nor am I asking you to make this into an artisan market or grant artisans an additional allotment of booths. I am simply asking that you honor our seniority when it comes to assigning permanent stalls and do away with the present antiquated case system. It has taken many years, but we have finally updated the look of the market. It has been approximately 10 to 15 years since the market bylaws have been updated. In this era of divisiveness, I implore you as Market Master and PMAC commissioners to do your part and make this market a fair and equitable venue for all market vendors. Sincerely, Christine Choupre.
So I think one thing that might be helpful is for me to understand, is there a policy on the artisans at the market, and is there any way of doing seniority for them? So I recognize that permanent stalls are at a premium, especially during the summer, but I was wondering about during the winter, if there could be, for the winter market where there are fewer farmers, if there's a way for people to know what stall they're getting in a week, since it makes it easier for them to set up then.
That's a good question. So first of all, let me say, I think this is something that the commission should address and discuss. It wasn't on the agenda today because I want some time to give notice to other vendors if we're going to discuss it, so they have a chance to come and comment. So the way it works now is we have the permanently assigned stalls to our annual vendors, and then we have our daily vendors under them in seniority who pick after we know which annual vendors are coming for the day. So a while ago it was decided that the artisan booth should only be 12% of the annual stalls assigned permanently. And thus, if the only way for an artisan vendor to move from the daily list to get an annual permanent stall is if another artisan retires, so that we keep the same percentage of annual vendors. What's been created then is the list is top heavy. The daily artisan list is top heavy with artisan vendors who have been there sometimes 20 some years already, but they're surpassed for the annual stalls by farmers. And so I think that's the issue, and it happens every year. It's difficult to change. I mean, okay, but your question about like winter, I think that would be a change to the rules, would require something. We pretty much apply the same rules in the summer as we do to the winter. Also, though, in the winter, so few vendors come that you basically have a better spot, no matter who you are, than you necessarily would in the summer when competitions, I think the summer is when it's more of an issue. Yeah.
So I think you're right, definitely, this seems like well within our purview to assess, and I'd love to hear from more vendors about, both artisan and not, about their assessment of this. I also think it'd be really helpful, maybe this is super obvious, Stephanie, but I think it'd be really helpful for us to see the actual bylaws that govern this, so that we can read what is in
Sure.
place now and get a sense of what the change would look like.
Yeah. Okay.
And one more thing is, I think I need a clarification on what exactly she's requesting
Yeah,
here, because she's saying that she's not asking the commission to expand the number of vendors, but it appears that she's asking for the artisan vendors who are at the top of the daily list to be granted annual stalls. So isn't that in effect increasing the annual stalls for artisan vendors? So I'm just not clear what her solution is. I'm a little confused by the wording.
Okay. Yes, and I think part of the process of letting vendors know when this is on our agenda is also, requesting them to submit a letter or a proposal, like what are you looking for, so that we can respond.
Sorry, would those bylaws also include, like, if there's a permanent vendor, I know some of them have multiple stalls, is there an easy way for them to downsize if they need to? I don't know if that ever comes up.
There is not an easy way to downsize a permanent stall. The opportunities come when each year we, as vendors drop out, stalls open up. So say a vendor retires. Their 3 stalls are now available to be assigned again as permanent stalls. That happens once a year. So that's kind of the opportunity.
But it's like an all or nothing. It's not, somebody couldn't say, I've got 3 stalls and I'd like to downsize to 2?
No, that couldn't really happen. Well, they could, but no one does. They could, actually it has happened, which is funny, it rarely happens, but it has. But then again, that stall that they gave up would just be open to be reassigned the one time of year we assign stalls.
But many artisans may only need small stalls, so, I'm just, we've still got the 12%.
Yeah, well,
But,
yeah, the artisans also, part of it is that they are only allowed 1 annual stall. That's part of the 12%.
Okay.
So our farmers can have up to 3, artisans can have 1.
okay.
I think part of this too that calls to me too is that the idea that they haven't really updated this for a long time, that this is a kind of, as a resource allocation thing that a long time ago, things were different in terms of how we could communicate and how we could actually share information, and that things have changed a lot. We could come up to the 21st century and actually have, there's a possibility of being more transparent and more flexible with that, because one of the things too that comes up that from a shopper's perspective is that if in the summer or winter or whenever, if there are people who want to sell something there that are maybe less frequent, and if it were easier for them to just backfill into spots without conflicting with anyone else, that would be great. And just to have more, so again, in a winter day, if there are tons of artisans that want to come in on a winter day and it's only a quarter full, that would be awesome. And it would be, and assuming they had an understanding that this was a quick drop in and a quick drop out. And if there were we have ways to do
Process or
this.
something, yeah.
It's not, and we have Uber, we have, there are simpler ways to get this out. And if we did bring that up, I think it really could revive the market and also might make it feel more transparent and fair, so that it's not just kind of something that happens in a back office. And not that I think anyone's trying to be deceptive, but more just that it's algorithmic, it's just all out there. That I think that would be, that's the way a lot of things are going, and I think there's an opportunity there.
Pop-up artist vendors.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. That'd be really cool.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's it, yeah.
And we need a call to adjourn. For a do we need a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Yeah, I think so.
We do, okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.